LoveLore Library. Chapter 185. Li Hongyuan saw that his soul seemed to have left his body, and his vitality seemed to be leaving his body little by little. Even if he were to say that he would die here, it probably wouldn't be a strange thing. However, these were not within the scope of Li Hongyuan's consideration. About the western border of Qiyuan, what do you have to say? This sentence pulled Min Yuhan back from his out-of-body state. The way he looked at Li Hongyuan changed. This commoner doesn't understand what Wang Ye is talking about. Until this question, he didn't understand the intention of this Jin Qin Wang to invite him. Even if it was to pull out some unknown competition, it would only be an accident and not the original purpose. But now, he vaguely understood. However, because he vaguely understood, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Since you have already said your origin, there will always be people who understand. At the very least, there is Jiangnan's #1 family, Pei clan. There are tens of thousands of people in the clan. Adding in the marriage and other messy relationships such as teachers and students, the number of people is at least 100,000. With so many people, there will always be a few who understand. At worst, Ben Wang will just spend some time and ask them one by one. Tell me, should Ben Wang start from the core of Min clan and Pei clan, or should I start from the periphery? Min Yuhan's eyes were about to split open. He suddenly got up and rushed towards Li Hongyuan. Not to mention the fact that this middle-aged man with his hands tied and his body didn't look very good, what kind of threat could he pose to Li Hongyuan? And he and the others who stayed at the side were especially vegetarians. If they let such a person get close to master, they don't need to mingle. However, with just one step, he was subdued in an instant. His entire upper body was pressed to the ground and his head was ruthlessly stepped on. Min Yuhan's insignificant struggle didn't have the slightest effect. Beast! That's your maternal family, aw. How can you be so ruthless? You really are his seed. He also hated himself for being too careless. Because the other party was Bien's son, he was surprised that the other party knew his identity. In addition, he deliberately wanted to discuss the other party, so he easily revealed his identity. However, even if she didn't say anything, would he really not know? Li Hongyuan waved his hand and Anit pulled him up, but his hand was still on Anyi's shoulder. Were you going to call me a beast? It probably didn't feel good to swallow it back, but as long as he still had his reason, it was still bearable. Although there are many people who curse this prince behind my back, those who curse in front of this prince are probably dead. This prince is still a prince, and the face and dignity of the imperial family are still important. Li Hongyuan took a sip of tea. As for the maternal family you mentioned, from the perspective of the adoptive mother, the maternal family should be surnamed Su. However, this prince has never been interested in the Su family. From the perspective of the biological mother, she was an orphan, so where did this maternal family come from? For more than 20 years, this prince hasn't even seen the shadow of the Pei family. Now that you've stirred up trouble and implicated the Pei family, you have the nerve to claim kinship with this prince. How many people have called this prince shameless? Obviously, this prince thinks that he is far less shameless than you people. Li Hongyuan was still undisciplined, but Min Yuhan's face was like a color palette, exceptionally wonderful. It wasn't clear whether she was more embarrassed or angry. The Pei family, not to mention Jiangnan, even in the entire Qiyuan, is considered the most powerful family. Even if no one enters the imperial court as an official, they have the imperial edict of Taizu. Unless the Pei family commits a great crime of rebellion, the Li imperial family can't make things difficult for the Pei family. The Min family can't compare, but they are also entangled. How can it be so easy to remove them? Back then, Imperial Father used your two families as a threat, but that was a joke. You were really tough to the end. At that time, he was only a prince, so what? Can he really uproot both of your clans? If he did it properly, he could even push all the aristocratic families to the opposite side of him. At that time, not to mention dealing with your two families, it is possible to demote him to a commoner, or even remove him from the family. She said that she didn't want the two families to suffer and was willing to give herself to you. If you didn't allow it, could she have run away on her own? In the end, she was just a person who could be casually abandoned. It was fine to announce her sudden death to the public, but in order to show your so-called loyalty, you resolutely refused to have anything to do with the Li imperial family. You removed a dead person from the family and cut off her connection with the Pei family. It's enough that you pretended to be benevolent to this extent. You were afraid that outsiders wouldn't know that there was something fishy going on. What do you know? You can't do it openly, but you can't do it secretly. Who doesn't know how to put up a front? Even if he was only a prince at that time, he had an emperor as his father. You people in the imperial family are better at venting your anger, aren't you? The Pei family has the so-called protective talisman, my Min family doesn't. Since that's the case, you also agree with what she did in your heart. In your heart, the Min family is more important than her. Who are you trying to show by pretending to be deeply in love with her? Li Hongyuan suddenly became angry and the teacup in his hand was thrown out. If you didn't run to the capital for no reason, would she have died? If she didn't die, would this prince be born as a devil and be deprived of the right to inherit the throne at birth, to the extent that I can only plot in secret? Would it take a lot of effort to marry a woman I like? Li Hongyuan's biological mother didn't die. In his previous life, he would have walked a completely different path. As the saying goes, a son's status depends on his mother. The most basic thing was that his mother was loved by Emperor Luqingdi, and there would be a lot of people willing to be loyal to him when he was born. Even Emperor Luqingdi would pave the way for his throne. In his life, he probably had nothing to do with Jingwan at all, so he was definitely venting his anger on her. It was really true that the members of the imperial family could vent their anger easily and confidently. However, Min Yuhan seemed to be strangled by someone. Even if he wanted to quibble and deny, he couldn't say a word. His face was ashen. Back then, when Tao Wu left, he was put under house arrest by his family. This house arrest lasted for 3 years. However, other than the initial agony, even though he was still in low spirits, he accepted this fact. It seemed like he was powerless to accept this fact, but in reality, just as Li Hongyuan said, it was only because he had lost the love of his life. From the beginning, he did not feel that his family should risk their lives to keep Tao Wu. For so many years, he had never realized this problem, but now, it was exposed. Was he like this? So, everything was his fault. Li Hongyuan, who was in a state of rage, didn't directly go forward to kill Min Yuhan. He was considered lucky. However, probably because his current state was too frightening, Min Yuhan didn't fall into a trance for long. Thinking about it, with such a murderous person around, how many people could be completely immersed in their own thoughts without being disturbed? Because he was sober, Min Yuhan finally realized another important point from Li Hongyuan's words: the devil. A prince, born as a devil, lost the most important right of a prince the moment he was born. If there was hatred, he should be the one who should be hated the most. Fortunately, Luqingdi didn't go too far and gave him the honor that a prince should have. Otherwise, what kind of life would he be living? Whether he could live until now was a big problem. He was Fu Cheng's child. When he thought of him living such a life, he suddenly felt extremely distressed. Because he knew that it wasn't Li Hongyuan who killed his mother, and the other half of his bloodline came from the enemy who killed his mother, the hatred that he originally had for Li Hongyuan collapsed. At this moment, Min Yuhan was unprecedentedly sober. He had been muddle-headed for so many years, and at this moment, he seemed to have finally found his goal. Fu Cheng, I will do my best to help your son get everything he wants. Then, I will look for you. Because his mentality had changed, the way he looked at Li Hongyuan had also changed. He was not even affected by Li Hongyuan's terrifying aura. Instead, he looked at Li Hongyuan with the affection of an elder towards a junior. He even fantasized that if Momo married him, Li Hongyuan would be his son. Therefore, after Li Hongyuan calmed down, he clearly saw that the way Min Yuhan looked at him was getting weirder and weirder. From the initial affection, he didn't know what his imagination was, but later on, there was even a bit of pity. Even Li Hongyuan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he sneered. One must know that he had never seen such a look from imperial concubine Su. Who was Li Hongyuan? Did he need others to pity him? To be honest, Li Hongyuan didn't think that he could understand the thoughts of people like Min Yuhan. Originally, he didn't intend to let him live after letting him know something that he shouldn't know. But now, perhaps he could reconsider. Take him away and let him wake up. Just looking at him now was annoying. The ground was quickly cleaned up. Eunuch Mook personally took the initiative. What devil? He didn't hear it at all. Li Hongyuan sat in the same place and seemed to be lost in thought as he looked at a certain place. Min Yuhan was quickly brought back. This time, his hair was wiped and combed again. Not to mention other things, his spirit had returned. The feeling that he gave off was completely different. He even seemed a few years younger. Although the Min family couldn't be compared to the Pei family, it was still a noble family. Min Yuhan was also a direct descendant. Naturally, the education he received was top-notch. He took back the style of an aristocratic family's descendant. Greetings, Your Highness. Although his gaze towards Li Hongyuan was still gentle, it was no longer as gentle as before. Li Hongyuan just looked at him indifferently. However, Min Yuhan automatically told him about the incident at the western border. In fact, there were only some signs of the incident. He happened to encounter it and secretly added fuel to the fire. As for the purpose, naturally, it was to cause trouble for the Li family. It would be good if he could cause internal strife or even overthrow the Qi Yuan. Anyone who was the emperor would be better than the current emperor. Li Hongyuan roughly knew about this matter and didn't need Min Yuhan to elaborate. Thus, he waved his hand and interrupted him. Is the remnant of the previous dynasty related to the Pei family? Chapter 186. Previously, he was ready to fight Li Hongyuan for the sake of the two clans. Now, he turned around and betrayed the two clans. It should be known that regardless of whether it was harboring or assisting, as long as it was related to the remnants of the previous dynasty, regardless of the number of remnants, even if there was only a little child left in the direct bloodline, it was already a crime of treason. It was enough to implicate 9 generations of the clan. In this way, how should one describe Min Yuhan? Should one say that he was heartless to the point that he didn't recognize his own family and was inhumane? Or should one say that he had deep feelings for his past love and that he placed righteousness before family after a sudden awakening? He once chose loyalty and filial piety, and now he chose friendship. It seemed good, but in fact, it was both wrong. Min Yuhan, you feel sorry for her, and now you want to compensate this prince. Min Yuhan's silence was equivalent to tacit agreement. Li Hongyuan sneered, you and that despicable and shameless villain who stole your fiancée are essentially the same. He killed her and then regretted it. He thought that he was infatuated with her for more than 20 years, and he didn't even ask if the dead person wanted it. Then, he tried his best to make it up to this prince. As long as this prince didn't covet the throne, it was as if he had forgotten that this prince's birth represented inauspiciousness. Even if he poked a hole in the sky, he would still take care of it. You couldn't protect her, so you also played the role of infatuation without regret. Similarly, have you asked if she wanted it? However, she is a dead person. If you want to ask, then you have to follow her down. Unfortunately, you are all greedy for the mortal world and are not infatuated enough to accompany her. You only live according to your wishes. Now that you know that her death has a lot to do with you, you are ready to blame it on this prince. She is a dead person, but this prince is still alive. Have you asked if this prince needed it? When this prince had no power, no status, and even his life was guaranteed, his compensation could only give this prince these things, so I accepted it. What about you? Do you think this prince needs you? After knowing what you've done, will you still be allowed to live freely? Min Yuhan, what gave you such an understanding? As she spoke, the mockery in her eyes was simply too obvious. At the beginning, Min Yuhan wanted to refute. How could he be the same as that person? However, when he finished listening, he was speechless. Even though his heart was burning with pain, he felt more and more that he was the same as that person. He was full of confidence and wanted to help, but he thought too highly of himself. Since this child knew his whereabouts and his plan was destroyed just as it started, it was obvious that the power in his hands was not weak. From this short contact, he understood that he was definitely not a kind person. Now that he knew the source, it was only a matter of time before he wanted to investigate the matter of the remnants of the previous dynasty. He looked like a big joke. Min Yuhan, who had just regained her energy, was dispirited again. After a moment of silence, she said, "That's good too. I can go see your mother sooner. You don't care about Pei clan and Min clan anymore." "I don't care. I can't care. It's not up to me to care. All these years, I have only used the surname of Min. They expected better from me and scolded me for indulging in love all day. I really don't have the heart to do anything." What Min Yuhan didn't say was that perhaps the Min and Pei families had a close relationship through marriage for generations. There were many officials in the Min family, but there were very few who reached the third rank and above. Obviously, it was because of the relationship with Pei family that they were suppressed. As for Pei family, as the richest family, it looked like they had a huge network of connections. However, when it came to interests, because they didn't have power, Pei family couldn't have the absolute right to speak. This was a great humiliation for the richest family. Thinking back to the unlimited glory of the previous dynasty, compared to the current situation, they had long had enough. Due to the ancestral teachings, they couldn't enter the officialdom. Therefore, the best way was to change the surname of the emperor. It could be something else, but it could also be Pei. How could the Min family not have such restlessness? Although Min Yuhan hated Lu Qingdi to the core and wanted to directly overthrow the Li family, after nearly 100 years, the Qi Yuan had already stabilized. Even if it had a great influence in Jiangnan, the people lived and worked in peace and contentment. They had long recognized that the Li family was the orthodox family. Even if they used the descendant of the previous dynasty as a banner, it was estimated that not many people would follow. Moreover, whether it was the Pei family or the Min family, they basically didn't have any military generals. As the saying goes, if a scholar rebels, it won't succeed in 3 years. The right time, the right place, and the right people were all not on the same page. But in reality, there were many people in the two families who had such ambitions. If this continued, they would be finished sooner or later. Rather than ending up with the execution of the whole family, it was better for Prince Jean to cut off those people's thoughts now so that they wouldn't end up with the extermination of the family. Prince Jean was destined not to expose this matter. For a prince who had hidden all his forces in the dark, exposing this matter meant that everything was exposed. Moreover, he could feel that Prince Jean didn't care about the descendant of the previous dynasty. It wasn't even contempt, it was as if he didn't put them in his eyes. Toward such an existence, who would muster such a large force? Didn't Li Hongyuan know about this situation? Of course he knew. In the previous life, he was the one who tidied up the Pei family. Naturally, there wasn't anything that he didn't know. However, that unrealistic ambition was quite laughable in Li Hongyuan's eyes. Fortunately, the Pei family didn't brazenly pull out the remnants of the previous dynasty. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as cutting off the Pei family's wings. It was a trivial connection, a rebellion. If it wasn't exposed, it could still be hidden, but if it was exposed, it would only lead to death. Li Hongyuan nodded, seemingly agreeing with his words. He slightly hooked the corner of his lips. Go see her. You say you want to see her, and she wants to see her. What do you take her for? Moreover, in 22 years, she might have already reincarnated. She might even be the mother of several children. Li Hongyuan continued to stab without holding back. This stab was so ruthless that his body swayed and he almost fell to the ground. Even though he staggered and stood firm, the rising and falling of his chest became more obvious. The frequency of the rising and falling of his chest also increased. In addition, he tightened the clothes on the left side of his chest. Blue veins protruded from the back of his hand. All of these indicated that he was in a terrible state. Even so, Li Hongyuan still hooked the corner of his lips. There was no warmth in his eyes. He was calm and unruffled. The bystanders couldn't help but feel pity for Min Yuhan. Falling into the hands of the master, she could only admit that she was unlucky and had to face physical and mental hardships. As for whether she would be unable to bear it and die, if she really died, she should feel lucky. Perhaps it was because he had long been accustomed to this kind of scene. No matter what he thought in his heart, his face didn't show a trace of it. Not only that, he could also ensure that he could listen to the master's orders at any time and wouldn't make a mistake because of being distracted. With such a poor ability to bear it, Li Hongyuan lost interest. His initial purpose of catching Min Yuhan was to determine whether he was a member of the Pei family. His goal was achieved and he even gained additional benefits. That was it. Send him away. Annoying. Yes. Because they weren't inside the imperial residence, there weren't many guards guarding the place. It wasn't difficult to get people in, and it wasn't difficult to send them away. They didn't even need to wait until nighttime. The carriage with the symbol of Jin Qin Wang Fu swaggered around and no one would question it. During this period, Min Yuhan's chaotic and blank mind cleared up a little. Li Hongyuan still kept his life and sent him away. Then he probably knew Li Hongyuan's intention. When they reached a place far enough away, he gave Min Yuhan some banknotes and some broken silver, enough for him to return to Jiangnan. Does Wang Ye have any specific instructions? Although Yi came out with him, he still couldn't help but ask. After all, the other party was his subordinate. Even if there were no clear instructions, he should be able to guess some of the master's thoughts. This was an essential skill for every subordinate. Master's thoughts have always been unpredictable. The specific matters will have to be handled by Mr. himself. What was the most annoying? It was this kind of thing without a goal. He couldn't estimate to what extent he had to do it, just like that, whatever. I understand. Min Yuhan accepted this statement indifferently. For him, it was better if there were no instructions. Then, he could do everything that he thought was beneficial to Jin Wangfu. Because when he was completely not recognized, not accepted, naturally there wouldn't be that kind of arbitrary situation where, I'm doing it for your own good, without considering other factors. That was something that really overflowed with Li Hongyuan. He nodded and left without saying anything. Min Yuhan looked at the carriage that was getting farther and farther away. He let him know the good things that he shouldn't know, but he let him go so easily. If he wasn't stupid, then he had absolute confidence. Min Yuhan recalled the short time that he got along with the other party. He was definitely not a stupid person. Perhaps he hadn't reached the point where he could control the whole situation, but he had reached the point where he wasn't afraid of being exposed. To be able to make him cheer up and dejected several times, it wasn't difficult to control a person's life and death. What was difficult was to control a person's emotions. Mimi, your son is completely different from you. However, he is very outstanding and very strong. Wait for me. I don't care if you've reincarnated, married, or given birth to a child, I'll still find you. Let me be selfish just this once. I can't let go of you. But for this matter, whether you agree or not, I'll persist. In the future, before I do anything else, I'll ask for your opinion. Maybe at that time, he will become our son. Min Yuhan revealed a shallow smile. He was walking towards an unknown road. Perhaps it would be full of thorns, and perhaps in the end, he would be deserted. But it didn't matter. He didn't care anymore. Li Hongyuan dealt with the information gathered from other places and seemed a little bored. Immediately send the things to the Ruan family. Yes. Shouldn't sending heads be done at night? It was broad daylight. Did Master not find it troublesome? However, shadow guards never had a sense of self. Their master's words were their first will. The Ruan family was now in a chaotic period. Lord Ruan, who had always been successful in the court, was helpless in the face of his daughters-in-law's coercion. It was said that a woman should treat her husband as her god. However, at this time, his son was useless. Master, someone outside the door has sent something. Lord Ruan, who was in a terrible fix, needed something to divert his attention. He felt that this was the right time. What is it? Bring it in. When a wooden box was carried in, Madame Ruan, whose eyes were red and swollen from crying, was inexplicably flustered. Chapter 187. Because the situation was in a stalemate, Wan Ruizhong was not the only one who needed other things to ease the tension. They needed it even more. It was unfilial of them to force their father-in-law. They were just relying on the fact that the Ruan family was a family of etiquette and their father-in-law was the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet. They wanted to save face and would not do too much. If the daughters-in-law of the Ruan family collectively had an accident, the reputation of the Ruan family, which was at the heart of the storm, would be completely ruined. Ruan Ruizhong might even have to retire early. However, their actions had already offended all the men of the Ruan family. The Ruan family's reputation was now so bad that the impact was too great. Even the grandmothers of the Ruan family who had married out used to visit their parents' home every now and then, but now it seemed that they had not seen them for a long time. Although Wan Ruizhong was still the Grand Secretary, he was already showing signs of decline. There was also the Minister of Personnel Affairs who was like fire and water with him. The help he could give in the imperial court was rapidly decreasing. Everyone was sensible. Who would want to help a person who was tainted with dirty water and was becoming more and more unreliable? For the sake of the children, they wanted to split the family and reduce this impact. What was wrong with that? However, neither their husband or their son supported them. Their mother and sister were such good people. It was fine if outsiders slandered them, but their own family members were hindering them at this time. It was simply unreasonable. Words of reprimand and heart-wrenching made them feel so much pain that they wished they were dead. Look, this was the ability of that woman. Because she could give these old and young masters what they wanted the most, whether it was money, connections, or even official positions. Regardless of whether they were legitimate or illegitimate, if they were rejected by their father-in-law, as long as they came to her, they would basically be satisfied. The most terrifying thing was that in order to keep them in suspense and control their greed, other than money, the benefits they received were basically small favors. However, she could make them not complain at all and even be deeply grateful. Moreover, the the mother-in-law and husband were acting intimately. They did not dare to say anything when they bumped into it, but were provoked by the mother-in-law. This was the truth of the harmony of the Wang family. The daughters-in-law of the grandchildren were better off. They were simply a pool of bitter water in their hearts. They knew what was going on, but they could not find anything that could be used against her. There was probably no sisters-in-law who could be more harmonious than them, because their enemies were the same, but the other side was like a mountain, unshakable. They wanted to use this opportunity to change the predicament of being completely in the palm of someone else's hand. However, without the support of a man, they huddled together tightly. As time passed, they seemed isolated and helpless, especially when they met the woman's sinister gaze. She wouldn't do anything to them now, but after that, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Even if they threatened to kill themselves, they knew that the chances of success were not high. However, they had no other choice, really no other way. Even if she had staked everything on this one throw, she could not hold on anymore. If her father-in-law's benevolence was gone, they would be completely finished. Therefore, when the things were carried in, they stood aside. Ruan Ruizhong ordered someone to open it. "Master, don't be in a hurry," Madame Ruan spoke out to stop him. "First, ask who sent it and what it is. Now is an eventful time." With a bit of melancholy and lamentation, Ruan Ruizhong was startled and understood her meaning. His face became serious. If they received something that they should not have received at this time, it could be fatal. Moreover, to send things to the Ruan family now, they either wanted to take advantage of the situation or had bad intentions. "Who sent it? Where is the name card?" "Master, the other party did not leave a name card." "Bastard, daring to accept things without a name card. Where is the person who sent it? Has he also left?" "Master, I also asked someone to stop them, but they could not. Moreover, the other party also said that it was best to quickly carry it in and hand it to Madame Ruan. It would not be good if outsiders saw it. I really can't do anything." Ruan Ruizhong's gaze froze. This clearly told them that this thing was not a good thing. He looked back at his wife with a puzzled expression. The other party also had a puzzled expression. In fact, he did not know. Knowing that it was for her, Madame Ruan's heart became more and more uneasy. "Master, why don't we carry it out first?" There were too many people present. If it was really something bad, it would not be easy to deal with it. Ruan Ruizhong nodded. "Carry it to the backyard." The two people from before were about to go forward and tie the rope again. Suddenly, a person rushed out from the side and pushed the box back. After the originally unlocked wooden box was overturned, the lid naturally opened and 2 or 3 things rolled out. There was a moment of silence. Terrified screams rose one after another. The people nearby immediately fled in all directions. Ruan Ruizhong also took 3 steps back, his face pale. Previously, when they were on the road, the 3 heads that appeared on Ruan Fangfei's carriage, other than the mother and daughter, the rest of the Ruan family only knew that such a thing had appeared before. They had never seen it clearly. Now that the number had doubled, the impact was no small matter. Madame Ruan's face was also deathly pale and her legs were weak. Half of it was fake, and the other half was real. The so-called real was not because she was afraid of these heads, but because she knew who these heads belonged to even without confirmation. She should have thought of it. Since they could plot against Fangfei there, they might have left a backup plan. What was she thinking at that time? They were just a group of lowly people. If they were killed, then so be it. Would the other party save them? Why did she not think that the other party might not save people, but would kill people? Kill her people. With the example of the 3 people on the road, the other party obviously knew the situation around her. How could she be so stupid? Because she had to hide herself well, many things were tied up. She cultivated these people and secretly placed them in various parts of the Wang family. It could be said that she had put in a lot of effort. In the end, she lost 9 people so easily. While she was distressed, she also had a deep fear. She always had a kind of fear that everything about her was under the other party's eyes. The other party knew about the people around her. Then, did the other party know about the things she did? Ruan Ruizhong saw his wife on the verge of collapse. He thought of a few days ago for Fang Fei. She was clearly frightened but forced herself to hold on. These days, her spirit had been weak. If it happened again, he did not know what would happen. He hurriedly covered her eyes. Come, where the hell are they? Clean up and get these filthy things away. Ruan Ruizhong roared. 2 servants hurriedly came in, trembling as they picked up the head and threw it into the wooden box. However, if one looked closely, they would find that the eyes of these 2 people were calm. They were not facing a terrifying and ferocious head, but a very normal thing. Moreover, the 2 people were only trembling with their hands, but their feet were firm and strong. However, no one would pay attention to this in the current situation. The wooden box was covered. Even so, no one dared to approach it. Ruan Ruizhong took a few breaths. Come, immediately send people out to search. See if the person who sent these things is still here. If found, quietly follow and determine where the other party is staying. Now, it was confirmed that the people who repeatedly targeted the Ruan family came from the capital. They did not find out before, but this time, they absolutely could not let them go. Although the possibility of finding them now was 0, but prepare a sedan. Luqingdi empathized with him and let him rest for a few more days. However, he could not sit still anymore. If this continued, before he fell, the family would be disbanded. If Madam still has energy, send people to check if the family is missing. If not, go back and rest. I won't force you. Master, where are you going? Madame Ruan held him tightly as if it could give her a sense of security. Ruan Ruizhong patted her hand. I am going to meet the emperor. The other party is so rampant. Since I have seen them, I must find the mastermind behind them. Otherwise, our family will not have a peaceful day. Madame Ruan's lips moved. She was very clear that the other party dared to brazenly send things to their door and did not keep them on the spot. Afterwards, there was no hope of catching them. In the end, she did not say anything to dissuade them because there was no reason to stop them. What she was most worried about now was how much the other party knew about her. If it was only on the surface, then it was fine. If everyone retreated. There was only a wooden box with 6 heads left in the hall. This kind of thing appeared again and again. Many of the masters and servants in the Ruan family were abnormally terrified. First, it appeared in the daughter's carriage. Now, it named the mother. It was as if the mother and daughter were the source of all this. When they saw Madame Ruan, they could not help but step back. It was as if there was something dirty on her body that would contaminate them. The next one who would be sent the heads would be them. Madame Ruan's face was full of anger. She had never seen her like this. Her stepson, who originally wanted to comfort her, subconsciously stepped back. She knew that she was in a mess and somewhat out of control. She hurriedly restrained her emotions. Her face was pale and weak. She looked very haggard. She glanced at them and paused for a moment on the daughter-in-law who had pushed the box. Go back and rest. Restrain the children. The servants, beat them if necessary. Don't let them scare the children with their big mouths. It did not matter whether what they saw was an illusion or not. At this time, no one stayed. Whether some couples would quarrel or even fight after returning, no one cared. Madame Wang ordered people to investigate. She knew in her heart, but she still had to put on an act. After sending everyone away, Madame Wang stood outside the door and looked at the wooden box in the room. Her gaze was deep. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she saw her daughter walking over like a ghost. Fangfei, why are you not resting? What are you doing here? Ruan Fangfei stood beside her and looked into the room. Heads. Same as last time. What heads? Who are you listening to? Fangfei, come back with mother. Mother is a bit tired and wants to rest. Ruan Fangfei avoided her hand and stepped over the threshold. She walked in and reached out to open the box. Fangfei. Her mother hurriedly pulled her. Be good. Go back with mother. Ruan Fangfei stared at her mother. Her eyes were like stagnant water. Then, Madame Ruan let go. Ruan Fangfei opened the box and saw the familiar ferocious and terrifying face. Her face instantly lost its color. However, she firmly did not move her gaze away. She even slowly bent down and trembled as she reached out her hand. Madame Ruan watched from the side. She clenched her handkerchief but did not stop her. Chapter 188. Madame Ruan couldn't help but frown. She knew that her daughter's current state was not right. As her daughter, it was destined that she would not be like the other girls who stayed in the boudoir. If she could surpass her master, that would be something to be happy about. However, this was her only child. In the end, she could not bear to do that. What she taught her was more about the survival skills of the inner residents. Once, she thought that there was no problem with the upbringing she had given her. However, a series of unexpected events had shattered her perception. She was glad that her daughter didn't break down and go crazy because of the heavy blow, but she also felt sorry for her body and mind. She hadn't gone through the first ordeal, and the latter followed closely behind. Her endurance was obviously in the middle stage. If she went crazy, then she wouldn't know anything, or she wouldn't take it seriously at all. Naturally, she wouldn't suffer. Now, she was either going backward or forward in the ordeal. As a mother, she naturally hoped for the latter. In fact, she didn't disappoint her. However, the problem now was because the process was too short. It was simply pulling the seedlings to help them grow. Crazy, cold, not recognizing her own family. Follow her and prosper. She would be a devil through and through. There were already signs of this before, but at this moment, it was taking shape. Madame Ruan restrained her gaze. Could it be that something happened just now that she didn't know? With a smile on her face, Ruan Fangfei turned over the 6 heads one by one to take a closer look. She even asked her mother with great interest how those wounds were formed. They were made after death. Wouldn't it be more interesting to cut them when they were alive? Her hands were full of dirt, but she didn't care at all. She didn't have the delicate appearance that she used to have when she was stained with dirt. After looking, she lost interest and used a handkerchief to wipe her hands. Little by little, she wiped very seriously and attentively. Clearly, some of the dirt couldn't be wiped off, but she still wiped it again and again. Mother, these people, were you the one who left them to slaughter the village? They failed to kill and were killed instead. They were really useless. However, this is also good. That village can be left to play with slowly. Mother, if there's anything you can't do, you can tell me. I can help you. Madame Wang quietly looked at her daughter. In fact, she had some faint regrets in her heart. If she had known that this day would come, she would have trained her in the best direction from the very beginning. Now that it was like this, it was too late to change. Everything else was fine, but loyalty was a big problem. Because she would only put herself first, everything else would have to be put behind. However, there was a wrong move. If she used it properly, she would become a sharp weapon if she didn't know the most crucial part. Madame Wang reached out and touched her face. Why are you covering your face at home and using such a thick cloth? Aren't you stuffy? Guan Fangfei's eyes were brimming with smiles. Then mother, help me take it down. Madame Wang nodded and casually took it off. Then, she was stunned. This. The face that was almost healed and the scar that was gradually fading had now turned into a black line. It was like a sinister and ugly worm. There were fine lines like a spider web on the edge. This was the final push. Fangfei, what's going on? You're asking me. How would I know? What I eat and wear, including the medicine used on my face, are all not under my control. There was a trace of innocence in her eyes that were no longer clear. Madame Ruan's face was very ugly. She was completely unaware that someone had taken advantage of her. If it wasn't so obvious, she was afraid that she would still be in the dark. But the problem was, when did this happen? Could it be that there was a loophole that she didn't know about in the backyard of the Ruan family that she controlled? Her own details might have been known by others, so it was reasonable for there to be a loophole. But this was unbearable. She took a deep breath. Fangfei, it's mother's negligence. Don't worry, mother will think of a way for you. No need, mother. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Guan Fangfei said with a smile. Good. When she no longer cared, she could be indestructible. Right, mother, prepare a man who is proficient in bedroom matters for me. Madame Luan slightly narrowed her eyes. She had really changed completely. Even if you didn't ask, I would have prepared one for you. This way, I won't have to waste my breath. But wait until your body recovers. Although her private parts weren't particularly injured, it wasn't suitable for her to have sex in a short period of time. Send it over tonight. There has to be a process of adaptation. Madame Luan was silent for a moment. She restrained all her emotions. Okay. She was straightforward. Guan Fangfei smiled. From now on, this woman in front of her would probably no longer treat her as a daughter. Speaking of which, it was funny. She herself was dirty, but she wanted a clean daughter. Did she want to preserve the last bit of beauty, or was she deceiving herself? No matter which one it was exceptionally stupid. Daughter will go back first. Madame Luan watched her step over the threshold, turn around, and leave. She then looked back at the wooden box. People like them really shouldn't have extravagant demands. The final result was the same. She closed the wooden box expressionlessly. Guan Fangfei's thoughts were right. She would no longer treat her as a daughter. Worldly possessions would still be the same as before. Emotionally, she would no longer be moved by her. She had completely abandoned her. Therefore, Madame Ruan's so-called feelings were quite ridiculous. Feelings that could be easily abandoned, were they called feelings? Perhaps she couldn't completely deny her efforts, but perhaps she had already imagined a situation like today. In fact, she had always had reservations in her heart. Since she didn't wholeheartedly in the past, she naturally wouldn't feel unbearable pain when she gave it up. Guan Ruizhong went to find Lu Qingdi. His original intention was to ask for an imperial edict to search everywhere. Obviously, Lu Qingdi wouldn't agree to such a request. After all, the people accompanying him were all favored ministers, important ministers, and the largest group of the royal family. Could these people's residences be searched casually? Moreover, his son was basically in the summer palace. It was absolutely impossible to let a minister, even a trusted minister, touch his head. In Lu Qingdi's view, it was only a minister who was targeted, not him. Moreover, the one who died was just an insignificant servant. There was no reason for him to mobilize so many people. Besides, other people were fine, but your family was in trouble. Wouldn't it make people suspect that there was something fishy about your family? For the sake of your loyalty, it was good enough that they didn't investigate you. Therefore, Lu Qingdi asked Yu Zhongxing to take some people to help him search other places. In fact, this was equivalent to not helping at all. Fortunately, Lu Qingdi didn't go to the extreme. He told Yuan Ruizhong that if he had evidence and knew who was behind the scenes, he could issue an imperial edict to search. After leaving Lu Qingdi's sight, Yuan Ruizhong's face became colder. It wasn't that he didn't feel that Lu Qingdi was gradually becoming colder towards him. The emperor was ruthless. There were many emperors who killed meritorious ministers. He was just a grand secretary and really didn't count for much. His Yuan family was at its most difficult time. Because of those rumors and slanders, he was also impeached. Although Lu Qingdi didn't say anything, it didn't mean that Lu Qingdi didn't have any objections. After all, it also damaged Jin Qinhuang's face. As for himself, although he wanted to be the same as before, he had to admit that his body was not as good as before. It seemed that he was somewhat powerless. However, these couldn't be revealed. Otherwise, the Yuan family would really be finished. Yu Zhongxing stood behind him. He was very clear about who was behind this matter and had long speculated that there was a problem with the Yuan family. What he was more puzzled about was whether the problem was with this grand secretary or other people in the Yuan family. However, he didn't need to ask about these. Since he acted as if he didn't know from the beginning, then he would keep it that way. In the end, Yuan Ruizhong didn't let Yu Zhongxing bring people to search with great fanfare. It was completely useless. There was no need to let everyone know and increase the gossip. Therefore, Yu Zhongxing brought people, as if they were patrolling. They walked around the courtyard area and then returned to report to Lu Qingdi. The Yuan family's summer palace was not as good as the Yuan family's inner residence in the capital. If Li Hongyuan wanted to deal with some people, he had already made arrangements. However, Madame Yuan had lost so many people. Moreover, they had only been here for less than a day. It was not enough to investigate the people who had been in the courtyard for a long time. Even if they were investigated, they would not be able to find any flaws in a short time. After all, these people's roots were not here. To get to the bottom of things was not something that could be done in a day. Moreover, they themselves did rough work. If they were sent away, there would be no replacement in this place. The best way was to strengthen the rules and let them perform their duties. Otherwise, if they came into contact with things that they should not come into contact with, then it would not matter even if they were spies. Therefore, what Madame Yuan really wanted to investigate was the entourage from the capital. Old Madame Yuan had always been a smart person. Smart people naturally had their weaknesses. If they didn't come into contact with things that they shouldn't come into contact with, it didn't mean that they couldn't get useful things. Nails didn't need to be very smart. Maybe they just needed to remember what they saw. In terms of manpower, old Madame Yuan was simply dregs compared to Li Hongyuan. There was no comparison at all. No matter how strict her defense was, there were still times when she could take advantage of a loophole. When he knew that she was doing a big investigation, Li Hongyuan didn't have any reaction. He just let people create something that was right but actually wrong. It was guaranteed that old Madame Yuan would completely block the loophole. At least, she would think so. In the evening, Li Hongyuan learned that old Madame Yuan had added a maid for her baby daughter. It was said that she was tall with long legs and a slender waist. She was a perfect beauty. The beauty held a lamp at night and walked leisurely. Not many people saw her. Li Hongyuan sneered. Playing this kind of trick to deceive others was fine. However, he seemed to have underestimated Yuan Fangfei. After being passively torn apart, she might as well be corrupted to the end. Even if he knew that she was a person with a strong will and wouldn't be defeated easily, what would it be like if she climbed back up again and again only to be stepped on again and again? She would live a life of grievance and humiliation, never being able to achieve the goal of her tone. However, it was late at night and he missed Wan. Chapter 189. Since she wanted to, he would go and have a look. This was not the first time he had attacked her at night. However, he intended to let her know of his existence tonight. Anyway, she was already his woman. Why should she hide? Someone was so self-righteous and shameless. He had never thought that as long as they were not married, everything would change. This kind of intimacy had crossed the bottom line and was absolutely not allowed. It had a great impact on a girl's family. If outsiders knew about it, it was equivalent to losing one's virginity before marriage. For example, if the person who was intimate with Jingwan, it should be said that he was her former two fiancés, even if he had nothing to do with Jingwan, he would definitely feel that it was inappropriate for him to be intimate with her. Given how much he cared about Jingwan, he would definitely explode and want to kill her. However, if this person was himself, his fiancée was equal to his wife. This was such a serious double standard. It was not the first time that he went to the Luo family, to the place where the third daughter of the Luo family lived in the middle of the night. It was a walk in the park for him. He was quite skilled in this business. He took the wind and climbed over the wall. Because Li Hongyuan didn't deliberately walk lightly, and every night, Bai Xiao and He Mei took turns to keep watch at night, not to mention the conscientious Nanny Gong. She would check the room at least once every night. Therefore, when he just approached, he had already been discovered. Seeing that Nanny Gong was silent, Bai Xiao also kept silent. Nanny Gong lit a small lamp. The light was dim and hazy. Because of a certain someone's frequent night raids, Nanny Gong firmly put an end to her young lady's habit of sleeping without clothes. She didn't want her young lady to be completely naked the moment he appeared, without even doing anything. Even so, on a hot day, Jingwan was only wearing a close-fitting dudu and underwear. She lay on her side with her face facing the inside. Only a thin silk blanket covered her waist. Therefore, her arms, back, and feet were all exposed. Even if he did not see her naked, the effect was almost the same. Someone's eyes became deeper and deeper. Li Hongyuan sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to hold Jingwan's leg. The soft and smooth feeling, Jingwan subconsciously kicked her foot, then immediately woke up. She woke up very quickly, and when she saw who was sitting by the bed, she suddenly sat up. She took the opportunity to withdraw her foot from his palm, and pulled the silk blanket around her waist to wrap it around her body. "Your Highness, why are you here?" She didn't dare to believe it. She knew you didn't follow the rules, but breaking into a lady's room at night. Li Hongyuan reached out and grabbed Jingwan's foot again, preventing her from retreating. A lazy and charming smile appeared on his face. "Because I miss you so much that I can't sleep at night, so I came here." He spoke the truth without any ambiguity. Jingwan rolled her eyes at him. After the initial shock, she thought about this fellow's style. It didn't seem strange that he would do such a thing. She regained her composure and withdrew her foot. After confirming that the other party wouldn't let go, she let him hold her foot. As he approached Jingwan's bottom line, Jingwan naturally retreated bit by bit. She hadn't touched his bottom line yet, so she didn't know how much he would indulge her. However, it was obvious that when facing Li Hongyuan, she was much more relaxed than before, and didn't follow the etiquette. "You don't believe me?" Li Hongyuan smiled and gently rubbed his finger on her foot. "Don't touch, it tickles." "I believe you, why wouldn't I believe you? You are a prince, so your words naturally carry weight," Jingwan said perfunctorily. They just saw each other during the day, and he missed her so much that he couldn't sleep. Who was he trying to fool? She was sleeping soundly, but was suddenly woken up. Even if Jingwan didn't have a morning temper, she was still in a bad mood. Now that your highness has seen her, you should go back and rest. Li Hongyuan looked at her with a smile. His eyes were like small hooks, and his hand moved up her foot, caressing her calf back and forth. Jiao Jiao, is this your first time touching this prince? The greasy way of addressing her couldn't be any more obvious, and the way his hand moved, this bastard. Do you need this subject to help your highness undress? Knowing that he wouldn't leave like this, Jingwan was too lazy to waste her breath. Is Jiao Jiao inviting this prince? The tip of his tongue brushed across his lips. Jingwan slightly tilted her face and covered her eyes with her hand. Bastard, using his beauty to trick her again. If your highness wants to rest like this, no one will have any objections. Actually, this prince doesn't have a problem either. I'm just worried that someone will feel unfair and take off my clothes later. His teasing tone and teasing expression made Jingwan want to slap him. He shouldn't have touched her sore spot. Jingwan was a little embarrassed, so she pulled the silk blanket and lay back down. Your highness, please don't disturb my rest. Thank you very much. Looking at her tightly wrapped back, Li Hongyuan laughed silently. He quickly took off his clothes, leaving only a pair of underwear. Bastard, I told you not to disturb my rest. Hearing the flirtatious sounds, Mama Gong looked at the blushing Bai Xiao. You should rest. I'll keep watch here. Yes, Mama. Bai Xiao crouched down and quickly left. Mama Gong sighed. She thought that it would take a long time, but it didn't take long for it to stop. A hungry wolf that had tasted a bit of meat was actually able to resist the temptation. It was truly unusual. Seeing that Li Hongyuan, who had kissed her fiercely, didn't do anything else, Jingwan was a little puzzled. Seeing her puzzled expression, Li Hongyuan was a little angry and amused. He reached out and pinched her nose. Do you want it that much? He straightened his back. Jingwan couldn't help but shrink back from the hot temperature. She quickly shook her head. If you don't want it, then behave. Although I said that the most precious thing should be saved for the wedding night, I can't guarantee that I'll do it. Sometimes, a man's rationality depends on his lower body. Li Hongyuan's smile was a little evil. I'm worried that I won't be able to control myself. So, Jiao Jiao, don't seduce me. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Jingwan reached out and slapped him across the face. Who was seducing who? Alright, stop fooling around. Li Hongyuan grabbed her hand and put it on his waist. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. There was a layer between them. He simply pulled the string of the dudu and threw it off the bed. Then, he continued to move downwards. Wang, you clearly said, don't talk. Li Hongyuan interrupted her. He removed the last barrier between them. Then, he hugged Jingwan and rubbed against her. He let out a satisfied sigh. When he couldn't do anything, Li Hongyuan found that he really liked the feeling of skin against skin. It was an indescribably wonderful feeling. Li Hongyuan liked it, but Jingwan might not like it. First, it was summer. Sticking to a person was like a stove. Second, this bastard was too tight. It was like being entangled by a python. It was uncomfortable. Jiao Jiao, I said, don't seduce me. Li Hongyuan tightened his grip. Wang, it's too tight. It's uncomfortable. Let go. She didn't expect him to let go. She could only ask for the next best thing. Let go if you call me husband. Li Hongyuan's chin rubbed against the top of her head. His eyes were closed. Shameless. Yuan, it's really uncomfortable. Can you let go? Jingwan softened her tone. Li Hongyuan laughed silently in a place where she couldn't see. He finally showed mercy and lay down on his back. He let her head rest on his shoulder and put her hand on his chest. His other hand pulled one of her legs over and put it on his lap. Her soft thigh just happened to touch an unspeakable place. Jingwan was about to move away when he patted her warningly. He felt that Jingwan was finally obedient. A certain someone was satisfied with everything except for the part that he couldn't be satisfied with before marriage. He felt Jingwan's breathing. What's wrong? Can't sleep. I'm not used to it. Jingwan spoke the truth. So, Wang Ye, can you leave my bed? You have to get used to it early. Jiao Jiao has to learn to adapt to my existence. Whether she was used to it or not, who knew better than him? Right now, it was just because she was awake that she wasn't used to it. Her body wasn't like that. The best example was that if she fell asleep, she wouldn't wake up just because he moved. That's after marriage. It was already early enough to be buried in the grave of marriage. In the end, he still wanted to deprive her of her freedom. After marriage, there are more important things. Jingwan chose to shut up. I can't sleep for a while. Talk to me. Talk about what? Jingwan's eyes were half closed. In fact, she was quite sleepy at this moment. She was trying to get sleepy. Who knows, she might fall asleep in a while. You talk, I'll listen. If I fall asleep, don't wake me up. A certain someone's voice was pleasant to listen to. Although it didn't become sexy because of the heavy desire, it was close to her ear. It was low and slightly numb. Perhaps it would have a very good hypnotic effect. Okay. Then, Li Hongyuan softly said some interesting things. Jingwan stifled a laugh from time to time. She thought to herself that she really couldn't tell that a certain someone was actually hiding a sense of humor. However, Jingwan's brain gradually emptied. She became more and more sleepy. She became drowsy and her breathing became more and more long. Wan, Jingwan unconsciously responded. Just live your life happily. Don't worry about anything else. Leave everything to me, okay? Okay. Jingwan responded. Li Hongyuan kissed her forehead. He knew that she most likely didn't hear what he said clearly. She only said good because he emphasized the last 3 words. She was like a child who only knew how to talk and didn't know how to think. Everything came out of her mouth. However, he took it that she agreed to everything. Chapter 190. Because there was no sound in the room, Nanny Gong entered the room and didn't put down the bed curtain. She saw the 2 naked people sleeping in each other's arms. She felt numb now. Because she couldn't stop it, she could only think in a positive way. But in the current situation, it seemed that she couldn't find anything good for her young lady. She was taken advantage of, and it might even damage her reputation. All the good things were taken by a shameless bastard. Well, Nanny Gong knew that he didn't sleep well, but he seemed to sleep well with his young lady in his arms. After all, she watched him grow up and he was the only son of the imperial noble consort. It was impossible for Nanny Gong not to feel sorry for him at all. So, she could only think in this way to comfort herself. Nanny Gong went forward and picked up the clothes that were thrown on the ground and put them aside. She also picked up the silk blanket that had fallen under the bed. She looked straight ahead and was about to cover them when she suddenly met Li Hongyuan's dark eyes. She paused and continued what she was doing. She put the silk blanket on them. It wasn't very tight, just from their chests to their thighs. On such a hot day, there was an ice basin in the room, but it was only to prevent their stomachs from catching a cold. Li Hongyuan took the opportunity to pull the silk blanket on Jingwan's shoulder. He tilted his head, put his cheek on her forehead, and closed his eyes. Except for himself, probably no one could be sure if he had fallen asleep just now. With his eyes closed, Li Hongyuan appeared to be much more harmless. In Granny Gong's eyes, the two of them were a young couple who slept with their necks intertwined. However, from the way they slept, she could tell that they were very loving. At least, he loved her very much. For ordinary couples, even if they slept on the same bed, they would sleep separately and each of them would occupy half of the bed. It was as if there was a boundary between them, not to mention those couples who still slept separately after the ceremony. Could they be called husband and wife? It would be better if they stayed like this for the rest of their lives. Nanny Gong took the lamp and turned to leave. Li Hongyuan blatantly stayed the night, so he naturally wouldn't leave early like before. Therefore, Jingwan woke up around the same time because of her biological clock. The honey-colored chest in front of her eyes and the warm and elastic touch under her palm made her a little dazed. Then, she sat up. It was the first time she was hugged to sleep by a man, but she had a good night's sleep as usual. This was completely illogical. She had slept alone for a long time, and the only time she slept with cousin Chow Chow, she couldn't sleep well and even moved to another place. She was hugged to sleep by a man, but she was used to it. With such a big movement, there was no reason for Li Hongyuan not to wake up. He half opened his eyes and used the weak light to look at Jingwan's vexed and depressed expression. The silk blanket slid down to her waist, and the view in front of her chest was very good. But she didn't realize it. Her expression became dark, and the grumpiness she had when she woke up had long flown away. Whether it was because of the morning or some other reason, a certain part of her body began to stir again. He reached out and pressed a certain attractive soft part and rubbed it gently. Only then did Jingwan come back to her senses. She grabbed the mischievous hand and flung it away. Li Hongyuan reached out and grabbed Jingwan's waist. He lifted his long leg and pressed Jingwan back. She let out a short and hurried scream, but before she could finish her sentence, it was completely sealed. Jingwan was so angry that she was scared of his shoulder. She slapped his shoulder, but she didn't restrain her strength at all. A certain someone didn't care and didn't even stop her. He focused on enjoying the morning dessert. Jingwan slapped him a few more times, but her strength gradually weakened. It was because her body was too young and inexperienced. In this aspect, Li Hongyuan was her master, so her resistance was infinitely close to zero. She couldn't withstand his teasing at all. Instead of hitting him, she turned into hugging his shoulder and back and catered to his kisses. There was a tendency for things to go awry. Knock, knock, knock. There were 3 moderate knocks on the door. "Miss, are you awake?" When Mama Gong saw the maidservant standing at the door with a cup of water, blushing and not daring to enter, she knew what was going on inside. It should be known that it was already early in the morning. It was really improper for them to be fooling around in a girl's boudoir in the Luo family. Even after marriage, no one would fool around in a girl's boudoir before marriage. Not to mention, they were still engaged. They had already endured it at night. Now, if it was discovered by others and spread to the ears of master and madam, it would be terrible. The maidservants were apprehensive, but she didn't. She directly knocked on the door. Suddenly awakened, Jingwan reached out to push him, but she couldn't move him at all. "Prince." Her expression was a little bad, because a certain someone was in heat early in the morning, and also because she was disappointing. Li Hongyuan's face was a little angry, but he quickly restrained himself. He buried his face in Jingwan's neck, unwilling to let go. Jingwan was so angry that she scratched him. There were a few obvious bloodstains on his shoulder and back, but a certain someone didn't seem to feel pain and didn't even make a sound. It was difficult for this kind of person to restrain himself from offending his superior. Jingwan's anger grew. She opened her mouth and fiercely bit him. Although it was a fierce bite, it was really a merciless one. She even tasted blood. Li Hongyuan finally moved. He reached out to touch her head. Good darling, let go. If you continue to bite, I won't be able to hold back. He hinted at her by straightening his back. Jingwan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Was this guy a masochist? He was bitten like this, but he was still excited. Miss. The urging voice sounded again. Prince, move. Jingwan's voice was a little cold this time, without any intention of discussion. Li Hongyuan raised his head. Zai, your temper is getting worse and worse. Jingwan sneered, who are you blaming? Me. Li Hongyuan admitted it like a hoodlum. On one hand, he indulged her without any bottom line. On the other hand, he was viciously angering her. It was time for a clay figurine's temper to come out. However, a certain person felt quite accomplished. Why aren't you moving? Li Hongyuan was quite obedient this time. He hugged her and turned around, placing her outside. Jingwan quickly got up and wrapped herself in a silk blanket. Just as she was about to call him in, she suddenly paused and turned around. His body was in the golden ratio. His muscles were perfect and not bulky. His lines were smooth and beautiful. He also had a face that was off the charts. Lying on his side with one hand supporting his head, he really was not an ordinary seductive person. Jingwan pulled off the silk blanket and covered him from head to toe. Who are you showing off to? My maidservant is about to get married. Her hand that was about to lift the silk blanket paused. Why did these words sound a little sour? She smiled silently. Her movements were a little smaller, only exposing her head. Fine, I'll only show it to you, my darling. He was covered, but she was not. It was convenient for a certain someone to see her from head to toe, although the light was too weak to see clearly. In Jingwan's opinion, this feeling was 100 times more shameful than having skin to skin. She subconsciously crossed her arms over her chest. Li Hongyuan laughed sullenly. Is there anything on your body that I haven't seen before? Jingwan was so angry that she simply smashed the pot. I'm getting up. Mama, come in. In any case, the people around her had already seen her from head to toe countless times. Thinking about it, she had been served since she was young. It would be strange if she still felt ashamed in front of the people around her. However, after doing something even more shameful, Jingwan could not remain calm even if she tried to pretend to be calm. When she saw Mama Gong come in with a lamp, her eyes were a little shifty and she did not dare to look at her. Mama Gong lit up the other lights in the room. Jingwan seemed to suddenly wake up and hurriedly grabbed a piece of clothing. After wrapping it around her body, she realized that it was a certain prince's clothing. Her clothes were taken away to be washed after she changed out of them last night. Now, she could only see the dudu and underwear that a certain someone had taken off. Mama Gong acted as if she did not know anything. She glanced at Li Hongyuan, who was on the bed, and said, "Bring the water in." If it was not for this person, they would not have come in first. The maidservants filed in. After confirming Li Hongyuan's position, they squatted down as a form of greeting and no longer looked up. However, in the end, he was a big man and his presence was too strong. However, no matter what they thought, this was the master's business. It was not their turn to interfere. They only needed to control their eyes and not look around. They also needed to control their mouths and not talk nonsense. Jingwan went to the bathroom in the back and quickly changed her clothes. Only then did the awkwardness lessen. After coming out, she quickly freshened up and looked at Li Hongyuan, who was, obediently, covered with a silk blanket. Your Highness, do you want me to help you get up? It would be best if he did not. How could Li Hongyuan not see Jingwan's insincerity? I'll have to trouble you, Jingwan. After fetching water again, the others left. Jingwan took his clothes and prepared to put them on him. However, a certain someone did not appreciate it and said that he wanted to wash up first. Jingwan wanted to throw the clothes directly at his face. However, when she saw that his shoulder was obviously bruised and swollen, and there was also blood, it seemed that she had bitten him too hard. In the end, she endured it. However, so what if he had a good body? Could he show off as he pleased just because he had a good body? Jingwan first brought him water to rinse his mouth, then wrung a handkerchief for him to wash his face. From beginning to end, a certain someone was sitting there with a golden knife. A certain part of his body was really irritating to the eyes. He did not take the handkerchief she handed to him and just slightly raised his head. When he did not take it, Jingwan also pretended that she did not understand his meaning and persistently stretched out her hand. This prince is still a little sleepy and wants to go back to sleep. Jingwan reached out and covered his face with the handkerchief, wiping his face carelessly. Jingwan is really not gentle at all. Jingwan's mouth twitched into a fake smile. This subject's daughter has never served anyone before. Your Highness, please excuse me. Li Hongyuan looked very magnanimous and did not want to argue with her. It's okay. Jingwan was born smart and quick-witted. She will probably learn after doing it a few times. Jingwan wanted to say that it was a skill she would learn after marriage. She did not want to learn it at all now. When she was putting on clothes, it was not very smooth. Since she was young, the people who served her were too conscientious. She basically never wore clothes herself. When she put on clothes for herself, she could not do it perfectly. Moreover, a certain someone was not very cooperative and kept moving his hands and feet. Even after half a day, he was still loose and looked particularly seductive. However, Jingwan was not in the mood to appreciate beauty. After this torment, she was already sweating all over before she even started her morning exercise. Fortunately, a certain someone knew his limits. When he saw that Jingwan was really going to be provoked, he took over and was very nimble. He was done properly in less than half a minute. You have this kind of hand speed, but you insist on letting her, this handicapped hand, do it. Is there any meaning in it? However, she was not someone who knew how to wear clothes herself. As a dignified Qin Wang, the people who served him should be more careful and meticulous. Not only was it surprising that she was so good at self-reliance, it was also very strange. Li Hongyuan put on his shoes and stood up. He reached out to pinch Jingwan's chin and smiled. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to. In the future, this prince can also serve the princess consort. As he spoke, he leaned over and kissed the corner of her mouth. Jingwan directly rolled her eyes at him. Your Highness should stay to serve others. This subject's daughter can't bear it. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes. Jingwan's words made him a little angry. He reached out to grab Jingwan's waist and pulled her into his arms. You are this prince's wife. If you can't bear it, then who else in this world can? Jingwan, the only person who can be on equal footing with this prince is you, understand? On equal footing. These 4 words made Jingwan more than a little surprised. In this secular world their imperial power was supreme and men were superior to women, even the wife of the first wife did not have the qualifications to be on equal footing with her husband. Otherwise, why would there be the saying that the husband was the sky? Even the empress, who was the mother of the world, had the same temperament. In Jingwan's opinion, a person like Li Hongyuan did not care about women at all. But he actually said such words. Jingwan even suspected that he had been seen through by someone. Wife? No matter what, many thanks to your highness. How could Li Hongyuan not understand Jingwan's meaning? She thought that he only respected his wife. It was the same for anyone who sat in this position. She never knew. It's not your wife, it's you. Only you can sit in this position. Do you understand? Only you, Luo Jingwan, the one and only, the most complete you. Jingwan was taken aback. Was what he meant by what she had understood? But, was it possible? He had so many fiancés. At that time, she had no interaction with him at all. But when she looked at Li Hongyuan, her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Sure enough, everyone liked to hear these words of love. Even she was no exception. Jingwan always said that she should guard her heart and not beat for any man. But she didn't know that if she could control her heart, then it wouldn't be called love. After a long while, Jingwan forced out a smile. Is that so? Many thanks to your highness for your love. She didn't know how stiff and forced her smile was. Li Hongyuan suddenly felt a little discouraged. This girl still didn't believe him. She just didn't understand. Sometimes, he even had the impulse to tell her everything. But in the end, he cooled down this idea. Wanwan had never been easily moved by sweet words. If he told her about those unknown feelings, she might think that he deliberately made it up. And even if she believed it, it had no direct connection to whether she was moved or not. It might even backfire. Not everyone could be used to others forcibly occupying their life. And Wanwan might even think that the person he liked was the person in her memory, and it had nothing to do with her. After all, she didn't know anything. Wanwan's nature was open-minded, but when it came to the relationship between a man and a woman, anyone could be stubborn. At that time, the only one who would be distressed would be herself. In any case, whether she knew about his past or not, he still had to take step by step to win her heart. He had to use practical actions to tell her that he loved her from the beginning to the end. Then, when the time was right, he would tell her everything about his past. Naturally, when the conditions were right, success would follow naturally, and Wanwan would be closer to his heart. When it came to Jingwan, he always remembered one thing: no matter how much he said, it was better to do it. Forget it. You'll know in the future. Li Hongyuan gently rubbed her neck and kissed her forehead. Jingwan felt his frustration and powerlessness, as if she had failed to live up to his feelings. If there was no relationship between them, Jingwan might not have done anything. But they were engaged, and soon, they would become the closest people. One's glory, one's loss, so this made her feel a little helpless. She couldn't tell right now. Was he doting on her? As a substitute? Or a change of heart? Or was it true love? No matter how mature Jingwan's temperament was, no matter how rational she was, and no matter how much psychological preparation she did, it couldn't change the fact that she was a blank slate when it came to love. She was not good at dealing with this kind of thing. Li Hongyuan looked at her small appearance and his mood improved a lot. This girl was actually soft-hearted. She was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. She valued friendship and righteousness. She would never accept other people's kindness for no reason. Once she accepted it, she would always try her best to return it. This was also good. Although her heart was a little heavy and difficult to conquer, it did not mean that it was impossible to conquer it. Because of their special relationship, he could force her to accept his kindness. Sooner or later, he would win her over. Don't think too much. Do what you should do. Just do what you want. Do what I want. In front of such beauty, Jingwan expressed that she wanted to pounce on him. Hence, she unceremoniously hooked her arms around Li Hongyuan's neck and kissed him fiercely. Before Li Hongyuan could turn the tables on her, she broke free from his grasp and ran away. Li Hongyuan touched his lips. Wanwan, are you comforting me? He suddenly smiled. Comforting. Of course not. Jingwan expressed that she was just seduced by his beauty. That was all. After that, Granny Gong came in and handed Li Hongyuan a cup of warm water. Miss said that drinking a cup of warm water after waking up every morning is good for your health. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows. He took the cup and drank it in one gulp. After that, Granny Gong quickly helped him tie up his hair. Jingwan didn't know how to do such a difficult thing. After everything was done, Li Hongyuan casually went out. However, Granny Gong, who stayed in the room to tidy up the bed, found some bloodstains. Her first reaction was to feel her heart sink. Could it be that miss? On second thought, it couldn't be. She didn't have any blood the last time they did it for so long. It didn't make sense for her to lose her virginity in such a short time last night. The bloodstains didn't look like any other traces. Since it wasn't her and there was no blood on her body, then it was most likely. She quickly tidied it up and didn't think too much about it. Jingwan was already doing morning exercises. Although he knew that if there was nothing going on, she wouldn't get up every day, but this was the first time Li Hongyuan saw it with his own eyes. The time they spent alone in the previous life wasn't short. However, because of special circumstances, Wan's morning exercises were also something to kill people. Suddenly, there was a kind of peace and quiet. Li Hongyuan sat at the side and watched. However, as he watched, his thoughts started to wander. With such a soft waist, sometimes, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted? The last time they had intimate contact, except for the last step, they did everything. However, they were all very ordinary positions. Maybe he could try something else next time. Li Hongyuan felt a little itchy on the tip of his tongue and unconsciously swept the inside of his teeth. The sky was about to turn white. Your Highness, you should go back. Granny Gong said. Li Hongyuan looked sideways at her and then stared at Jingwan for a while. Finally, he stood up and walked towards Jingwan. Your Highness, are you leaving? You can't bear to part with me. Then after I have my meal, I'll go see your grandparents before I leave. Farewell, Your Highness. When dealing with a thick-skinned person, one couldn't hesitate at all. Even more so, one couldn't persuade him to stay. TSK, her forehead was wet with sweat and her face was stiff. The words, "Get lost," were clearly written on her face. He reached out to touch her face and leaned closer. With a charming smile, he said, "Sweetheart, wait for me tonight." In response to Li Hongyuan, Jingwan's face was as stiff as a coffin. Li Hongyuan was in a good mood. He held her face and kissed her without any disdain. It's impolite not to reciprocate. This is a gift in return. Then he walked away. Bastard! Jingwan cursed in a low voice. She looked at the servant girls and saw that they all had their heads lowered. The only thing missing was a sign above their heads that said, "This servant didn't see." Granny Gong's back was as he left. Her sign probably said, "Out of sight, out of mind." His reputation, his image, they were all ruined by that bastard. Li Hongyuan returned to the mansion. As a close attendant, Eunuch Mu had already prepared water for the bath. However, his master seemed to be coming back much later than expected. It was different from the previous times. Chapter 191. Because it was summer, the temperature of the bath water was not high, but it cooled slowly. In addition, Li Hongyuan actually needed cold water to calm his mind at this time, so he soaked in the water for a relatively long time. When Li Hongyuan climbed out of the water and cleaned up, it was already 2 hours later. Breakfast was served. Li Hongyuan did not ask anyone to serve him food. He ate slowly while drinking wine. That's right, breakfast with wine was so crazy. However, according to the attitude of the people around him, this was definitely not the first time. However, looking at his appearance, he should be thinking about something. No one dared to disturb him. He was silent, as if he was invisible. If he could not move, he would resolutely not move a step. Li Hongyuan put down his chopsticks. It was already half an hour. Finally, he looked at the extra person, who did not belong to him, as if he was doing charity. The other party was also quite perceptive. When he met Li Hongyuan's gaze, he immediately greeted him and then explained the purpose of his visit. To put it bluntly, it was that imperial concubine Su missed her son, but this son was disobedient and did not live in the palace. She had no choice but to send people out to look for him. It was also a heart of love for his son. He could not give face to his father, but he still had to give face to his mother. Li Hongyuan led the people into the palace. The summer palace was built on the side of the mountain. The higher it was, the cooler it was. Undoubtedly, Emperor Lucheng's bedroom and the main hall of the summer palace were located at the top of the mountain. In contrast, the more favored one was, the higher the position of the courtyard. Whether it was imperial concubine Su or Li Hongyuan, they were both on the second level. However, facing the main hall at the top of the mountain was a vast and long stone staircase. The staircase was on both sides, and in the middle were various forms of lifelike dragon reliefs. From the foot of the mountain to the top, this huge project was even more painstaking than the reliefs in the palace. However, although it was grand, it was difficult to climb up step by step. Out of 10 people, 8 of them would probably be panting with their hands on their knees. Fortunately, there was no crazy government decree that prohibited people from riding on palanquins or horses in order to show respect to the imperial power. Of course, this wasn't the only way up the mountain. Ordinary people weren't qualified to take this path. Li Hongyuan rode on his horse with an indifferent expression. If one looked closely, they would find that he was actually somewhat happy. Apart from the grand main road, the rest of the palace was also meticulously built. Every flower, every tree, every building, and every pavilion would leave one racking their brains. Take noble consort Su's courtyard for example. Although it wasn't as grand and luxurious as her palace in the imperial palace and occupied a much smaller area, it was still ingenious and had its own unique flavor. The most distinctive feature of the temporary imperial residence was the continuous rise and fall of mountains as far as the eye could see. It looked magnificent. However, not everyone had the fortune to see this kind of scenery. At the very least, one had to have enough status and dignity to be able to see it. When Li Hongyuan saw noble consort Su, Luchengdi, Prince Rui, and Princess Minxiang were all present. His parents and 2 biological children were present. This was probably a happy and harmonious family. Not to mention now, even if Li Hongyuan went back 10 years, he wouldn't feel anything about this scene. Of course, at that time, he would already be an old thing in a tender shell. If he was really 10 years old, he might feel sad, or perhaps he wouldn't feel anything. After all, noble consort Su treated him as her biological son and had never neglected him. However, that time was too long ago for him. How could he still remember such insignificant things? Before he got close, noble consort Su had already seen him and hurriedly waved at him. She was brimming with joy and the gentleness of a loving mother. It was as if with the appearance of this son, the 2 children that crawled out of her womb could be cast aside. Princess Minxiang, who was originally smiling happily, immediately froze. Among all the siblings, including the cousins, Princess Minxiang was the second most afraid of him. In fact, everyone knew that Li Hongyuan actually treated this younger sister quite well. At least, he had never done anything to her. Sometimes, he would even give her some good things. However, Princess Minxiang was inexplicably afraid of him. Mother, did you send someone to call sixth brother over? Princess Minxiang's voice was trembling. Yes, what's wrong? Noble consort Su touched her hand. It was impossible for her not to notice her daughter's true feelings towards her son. After all, it wasn't just a day or two, but several years. In fact, she had tried her best to avoid the two of them meeting. However, no matter how much she tried to avoid it, it was impossible for them to not meet forever. Because her son didn't do anything wrong, she couldn't even let Luqingdi know about this. Otherwise, he might not like Minxiang. There aren't many chances to meet each other. You should take advantage of this opportunity to kiss each other properly. Princess Minxiang wanted to cry but had no tears. Mother, what's wrong with Minxiang? Luqingdi also turned to look at her. Her face was a bit pale and her expression wasn't right. Not feeling well. If you don't feel well, call the imperial physician. However, weren't you fine just now? Imperial consort Su gently squeezed her hand. Princess Minxiang immediately smiled. Many thanks for imperial father's concern. Daughter is fine. It's just that when I saw sixth brother, I suddenly thought of the dream I had last night. In the dream, sixth brother scared me. Since that's the case, then imperial father will teach him a lesson for you. Let him scare people even in his dream. No way. Dreams are all fake. Sixth brother treats daughter the best. How can I teach sixth brother a lesson because of this? Princess Minxiang pouted unhappily. Luqingdi laughed. Your servant girl is just like your mother. You only know how to protect him. Although he said that, Luqingdi was happy from the bottom of his heart. That evil creature's temper was too bad. His siblings weren't close to him. As his father, he still hoped that he could have a pure blood relationship with him. Princess Minxiang also covered her mouth and smiled. Only noble consort Su, who was holding her hand, knew that her palm was already sweaty. Could Princess Minxiang clearly express her dislike for this sixth imperial brother? Of course she could. She could stay far away from him just like the other siblings. However, if she did that, just as noble consort Su thought, her position in Luqingdi's heart would plummet. It was reasonable for others to distance themselves from Li Hongyuan, including her own brother, Li Hongming. However, she couldn't. She wasn't as favored as Li Hongyuan. When Li Hongyuan didn't do anything wrong, if she distanced herself from her brother, it would only make Luqingdi think that she was cold and cold-hearted. She would be disliked. Li Hongming naturally knew all of this. He wasn't like noble consort Su who had deep feelings for Li Hongyuan. He had always been suspicious of Li Hongyuan. However, as the person involved, even Minxiang couldn't say anything. He could only suppress his suspicions in his heart. If he said it out loud, not only would it not affect Li Hongyuan, it might even cause him to suffer. It was true that Minxiang was his biological sister. However, a sister who didn't even have much value in a marriage alliance was just a so-so. Li Hongyuan walked in and paid his respects. He knew what the current atmosphere was but he didn't care. It was enough to teach Minxiang a lesson once. When she was obedient, who would have the time to care about her? As for what would happen to her in the future, it was completely out of Li Hongyuan's consideration. Whether she lived or died, whether she was good or bad, it was all the same. Princess Minxiang stood up and greeted him. She very properly called him sixth brother very intimately. Li Hongyuan smiled faintly. Minxiang is becoming more and more beautiful. Actually, Li Hongyuan didn't smile often. Who knew how many people would be stunned when they suddenly saw it? Just like right now, even his mother seemed to be mesmerized. However, after noble consort Su regained her senses, she subconsciously looked at Luqingdi. Even she could feel that this smile was similar to the one in her memory. How could he not know? Sure enough, Lu Qingdi stared at his son in a daze. No one would think that he was looking at his son. Li Hongming also saw it. His face turned green and he unconsciously clenched his fists. He actually had some impression of the imperial noble consort, but it wasn't deep. He seemed to think that she was a woman who was very beautiful when she smiled and seemed to have touched his head gently before. Other than that, there was nothing else. However, his mother said that old Sixth looked very similar to her, especially when they were young. It was as if they were carved out of the same mold. However, he was a man after all. As he grew older, when the characteristics of a man became more obvious, the degree of similarity would decrease. However, from his imperial father's expression, he knew that his imperial father would never forget her. It was said that a son's status depended on his mother. Even though his mother had firmly told him that his father would not give the throne to his sixth son, he was still very afraid in his heart. Leaving the throne to his favorite son, how many emperors had done this in history? Li Hongyuan didn't seem to notice their colorful expressions at all. Mother, Min Xiang is of age now. Has her husband been chosen? Li Hongyuan's words pulled everyone back to reality. Imperial noble consort Su's expression froze for a moment. She seemed to have just realized what Li Hongyuan had said and smiled. Basically, it's already been chosen. It will probably be completely settled after we return from the summer vacation. The person that Imperial Mother has chosen must be the best. However, there's always a chance. No one can be sure of the future. Min Xiang, if he wronged you in the future, just tell Sixth Brother. Sixth Brother will help you deal with him. Thank you, Sixth Brother. Princess Min Xiang said with a smile and a trace of shyness on her face. Lu Qingdi hid the disappointment on his face and snorted coldly. You evil creature. If you deal with him, how can he still be alive? You want your sister to become a widow, don't you? What is your Majesty saying? You make it sound as if Yuan-er is cruel. Yuan-er's temper is a bit bad, but he has never taken someone's life easily. Min Xiang's future husband is his younger sister's husband. Yuan-er will definitely know when to stop. Yuan-er's heart is full of love for his sister. I can't let you distort it, Imperial Noble Consort Su said with a smile. Then Imperial Father, just take it that Aken has nothing better to do and is meddling in other people's business. Speaking of which, Min Xiang still has her biological older brother. How can Aken have a turn? Li Hongyuan didn't care. He lifted his robe and sat down at the side. Evil creature, Lu Qingdi picked up the plate of pastries beside him and threw it over. Li Hongyuan tilted his head and the plate fell to the ground and shattered. The few pastries scattered everywhere. Saying such heart-wrenching words, your mother raised you for nothing. Li Hongyuan didn't even look at him. Lu Qingdi was so angry that he choked. On the other hand, Imperial Noble Consort Su covered her mouth and laughed. My beloved consort, you can still laugh after raising such an ingrate. If it were me, I would definitely want to beat him to death. Your Majesty, this concubine can't bear to do that. Besides, Yuan-er is trying to stop you, not this concubine. As his mother, how can this concubine not know what Yuan-er is thinking? This concubine regards him as her son, and Yuan-er naturally regards this concubine as his biological mother. It was you who said something first. It's not the first day you know what kind of temper he has. And it's my fault. Lu Qingdi raised his eyebrows and glared. That's what your Majesty said. I didn't say anything. Imperial Noble Consort Su looked at him with a smile. Imperial Noble Consort Su had been by Lu Qingdi's side for 20 to 30 years and had always been favored. The reason was not one-sided. Because she had a good grasp of Lu Qingdi's emotions, she didn't have to worry about offending him when she occasionally joked or said something rebellious. On the contrary, it made Lu Qingdi experience something that he couldn't experience elsewhere, such as the warmth between an ordinary husband and wife. Who doesn't know that Minxiang likes sixth brother the most? As her third brother, I sometimes get jealous. Besides, it's obvious that sixth brother likes Minxiang. As brothers and sisters, we can't help but be envious. Sometimes I also want sixth brother to help prevent her anger. Unfortunately, I don't have that charm. Li Hongming interrupted with a smile. As an elder brother, you want your younger brother to help you vent your anger. How can you say that? Lu Qingdi scolded with a smile. Therefore, Lu Qingdi's face was like that of a child in June, changing constantly. It can't be helped. Sixth brother's fame is too great. It's not difficult for him to suppress everyone. Sometimes, son's mouth is dry from talking. It's better to use sixth brother's name. Li Hongming seemed to be helpless. Lu Qingdi's smile faded a little. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. This evil creature is a hooligan. His reputation as a hooligan is well known. Why? Do you often meet another group of hooligans? Those who often dealt with hooligans could basically be classified as idle dandy. Li Hongyuan could, but Li Hongming dared to do so. He would definitely be severely punished. How could Li Hongming not know that he said something wrong? When he met Imperial Noble Consort Sue's indifferent eyes, his heart trembled. How can that be? Son is just a little envious of sixth brother because he's too carefree. Naturally, I can't wait to drag him back to share Imperial Father's worries. Among the brothers, he's the most leisurely. Not to mention son, I reckon that even my younger brothers who are still in school want to beat him up. Lu Qingdi glanced at him. Let him do things. You're saying that you're going to spend all your time outside of work cleaning up his mess. Just take care of yourself. He'll be like this for the rest of his life. Perhaps Lu Qingdi's last sentence wasn't just for Li Hongming to hear. It wasn't the first time that Li Hongyuan heard Lu Qingdi say such specious words. It sounded like he expected better from him, but it was also a different kind of warning, telling him not to have any thoughts that he shouldn't have. Li Hongyuan never took it seriously. If he really counted on his father, he didn't need to mingle. It was better for him to tuck his tail between his legs early on. Li Hongyuan wasn't a person who was willing to be ordinary. Even in his previous life, before he encountered an accident, he wasn't a person who followed the rules. To be honest, if it wasn't for Imperial Noble Consort Su, he probably would have fought with his other brothers to the death from the beginning. It could only be said that Imperial Noble Consort Su was too successful as a person and as a mother. Leaving these aside, they talked about some other interesting things. Li Hongyuan leaned lazily on the side, listless, as if he hadn't woken up yet. Imperial Noble Consort Su looked at him with a smile. What did Yuan do last night? What did he do? Meet a beauty in private. What else could he do? He was telling the truth. You're never serious. When Li Hongyuan went out, although it was always Eunuch Mu who took care of the trivial matters, it wasn't the case in other people's eyes. He also had 4 beautiful maids by his side. He used a side courtyard in the capital to raise beauties, and none of his maids had a status in his harem. However, no one believed that his maids were still virgins. However, because those 4 rarely showed up, it didn't arouse anyone's suspicion. He didn't bring anyone else with him on this trip. These 4 were by his side, meeting beauties at night. Who else could it be other than them? As the saying goes, food and sex are part of human nature. How is it not serious? Li Hongyuan's sitting posture became even more limp, as if his bones had been pulled out. Okay. Whatever you say. Imperial Noble Consort Su said and gestured to an auntie beside her. That auntie squatted and left. Soon, she came back, followed by a line of beauties. These are the palace maids sent to the temporary imperial residence by the subordinates. You can pick 2 and take them back. Before the emperor went to the temporary imperial residence, he had arranged for beauties to be sent to the temporary imperial residence. This was something he was accustomed to, just like how he would select women from all over the country to fill his harem every year. As for these women, most of them were daughters of officials from all over the country. It was just that their fathers were all minor officials. The purpose of those people was nothing more than to climb up the social ladder. The people above them naturally wanted to climb to a higher position. The biggest characteristic of these women was their beauty. If these women were favored and doted on, it would bring great benefits to those people. If it was just a small official whose daughter flew up to a branch and became a phoenix, then it would be like a man ascending to the Tao and his chickens and dogs ascending to the heavens. Even the group of people who sent her up would benefit. Perhaps they would be able to secretly dream of things that they shouldn't dream of. However, it wasn't as if there weren't any beautiful dreams that came true in history. Speaking of these women, the ones who disliked them the most were probably the young imperial concubines who accompanied them. To them, traveling with the emperor was a rare opportunity. Compared to when they were in the palace, there were much fewer people fighting over them. If they served the emperor more often, they might be able to conceive a son. Now that they were pregnant, of course, they didn't expect them to fight for anything. They just wanted to have someone to rely on. In the future, when the emperor passed away, their son would be conferred the title of prince. When that time came, they would follow their son out of the palace and become an imperial concubine. For those who had served the emperor before, it was probably the best way out. Otherwise, when the time came, they would become nuns, or even worse, directly be buried with the emperor. However, they never expected that there would be a group of little vixens waiting in the temporary imperial residence. When they found out about this situation, they didn't know how many handkerchiefs they had torn, but in the end, they were helpless. Didn't they see that the imperial concubine with the highest rank had a calm face and didn't say a word? Thus, it wasn't their turn to speak. Imperial concubine Su was even in a good mood to summon these women. They all thought that she wanted to make the first move to gain the upper hand and choose them to strengthen her favor. Now they finally knew her intention. It turned out that she chose them for her son. Looking at Luchingdi's indifferent expression, perhaps he had known about it long ago, or perhaps he wasn't so passionate about beauties now, so he was like this. There were a total of 8 women. Some were dressed elegantly, some were beautiful, some were gentle, and some were playful. In short, each had their own merits. Li Hongyuan looked at them indifferently. They probably already knew who the master was, each of them secretly glanced at him. After meeting his gaze, they quickly lowered their heads and blushed. Even if they were familiar with Li Hongyuan's virtue, many people still fell for him, not to mention these people who didn't know at all. Such a handsome man seemed to be favored. Wouldn't it be better to follow such a person than to follow the emperor? Although the emperor didn't look too old, he couldn't be compared to his son's strong body. In short, these 8 women were completely bewitched by Li Hongyuan without understanding the situation. They forgot their original purpose and the expectations of the people who sent them in. As a result, there were 2 or 3 bold women. Some were shy, some were natural and unrestrained, and some were smiling sweetly. They looked at Li Hongyuan, intentionally or unintentionally, in an attempt to attract his attention. Li Hongyuan's eyes wandered around. Imperial mother, leave it to the other brothers. This son is not interested. As soon as these words came out, the 8 beautiful women all showed disappointed expressions. There was even one who moved her feet, as if she wanted to directly recommend herself to be his pillow. Fortunately, she restrained herself. Imperial concubine Su saw that his expression didn't change and he really looked disinterested. She raised her eyebrows. Is Yuan Her feeling unwell? The others followed and looked over. Imperial Mother, why do you say that? Imperial Concubine Su smiled faintly, unusually graceful and dignified. It's just that there has been no one by Yuan Her's side for a long time. Li Hongyuan restrained some of his laziness and looked at Imperial Concubine Su with some surprise in his eyes. Imperial Mother is thinking too much. Imperial Concubine Su coughed lightly. In fact, she was also a little embarrassed. It's good that you're fine. Li Hongyuan nodded. Of course I'm fine. This son just feels annoyed and doesn't want to raise people to play with for the time being. It's not to the point where there is no one to serve me. In that case, just casually pick two to serve me tea. As servant girls, they didn't need to be pampered. If they liked them, they could look at them a few more times. If they didn't like them, they could be thrown aside. Occasionally, they could be used to relieve boredom at night. To put it bluntly, they were just playthings. There was still no progress on his wife's side. If he brought them back, even if he didn't touch them at all, no one would believe that he really cultivated his body and mind. When would he be able to wash off the dirty water on his body? Therefore, he definitely couldn't accept them. This time, he seemed to be carefully sizing them up. They're too ugly. Don't.